Hey everybody, in today's video I'm going to go over how to highlight rows and columns, the row and column that you've selected on a spreadsheet. So for instance, if I select this cell right here and I want to select all of column H and all of row 11, right? So this can be just to make your spreadsheet a bit easier to use, especially for people who may have trouble with Excel or get lost in their large screens to see where exactly they are in a spreadsheet. So I'm going to show you how you can set this up using Visual Basic with just a few lines of code. So it's not terribly complicated. I'll walk you through the process. So for starters, you may want to enable the developer tab if you don't have it already. So if you don't see it on your ribbon, you can go to File, select Options, and then select the Customize Ribbon option, and make sure you've got this developer tab ticked off. If you do, then you should see it on the ribbon. And from here, you can access the macro recorder if you want to test out how to record macros. And you can also go into Visual Basic. You can also do that by using the shortcut Alt F11. So if I click on this, we open up Visual Basic, and now we can start with our coding. So for starters, I'm going to go into my sheet, which I've selected, because you can select code that runs just specific to a sheet. You can have code specific for the entire workbook, right? So in this case, I'm just going to select this individual worksheet, and I'm going to keep the default option here for selection change. So these are the different events, right? So there's different things like before someone right clicks, before they double click, right when it's activated. So all sorts of different events here that can trigger a macro. In this case, I'm just selecting the selection change, which, as the name suggests, is just going to trigger when you make a different selection on your spreadsheets. So that means, just selecting a different cell. The macro is going to run. So the one thing to be cautious about is when you're creating macros, you don't want them to trigger potentially too often, especially if it's complicated code, because then, as you can imagine, that's always running every time you do something. It could slow down your spreadsheet. In this case, it's a really simple macro, so there's no harm in that. So what I'm going to do is just write a few lines of code here, and the first one is just going to be to clear any colors from the spreadsheet. So that's going to be cells, and this selects all the cells on the sheet, and then interior, which allows us to access the color index. And I can just set this to none. Excel none. So that way that clears everything out, gets rid of that, because every time we're making a selection, we don't want to leave a trail of all this highlighting along. Then we want to clear it off and then apply the formatting. So also important to note that if you do have other formatting or colors on your spreadsheet, then obviously that would wipe that out. So just keep that in mind. So we can do here is now use the active cell, and that's the cell that you're on. Select the entire row. Again, go to that interior, and this time select color. And I'm going to use the RGB method here, and where you can specify the red, green, and blue values. So you can do a Google search for an RGB calculator or a lookup to see what combination you want, specifically if there's a certain color code you want. In this example, I'm going to use yellow, which is just 255, 255, and 0. And then for the active cell, the entire column, interior. And once you've found what you're looking for, you can just tab over. You don't have to type in the entire thing. Color, and again, let's do RGB, 255, 255, and 0. So I've done that. So my code is ready to go. If it works properly, it'll activate as soon as I select another cell. So if I click here, it's highlighted yellow, right? So it's working. So if I click away, it's going to clear all the formatting, clear all the colors, and then highlight just what I've selected. So it's done that, right? So it's working as designed. So as you can see, it's selecting everything in here. If I select multiple cells, it's just going to select that one active cell, right? So that leftmost cell, it's going to select that. So it's not going to select multiple. And, if you just wanted to highlight the row, go back into Visual Basic here. Let's say we don't want the column because the column is really really wide. What we could do is you could delete it, or if you just want to test it out and see how it works, we can just enter an apostrophe. And what that does is that's going to comment this out. So you can see it goes to a gray color here. So that tells us it's a comment. So comments are useful when you're in code. So you can say, oh, okay, let's say we add a comment here, tab over, this sets the color to nothing, right? So it sort of tells us what's happening. So you can comment out your code for testing purposes just to see, especially if you want to test other things out. So in this case, I've commented out the entire column, the macro that highlighted the column. So right now I'm left with clearing it out and setting the row to a yellow highlight. So now, if I click on another cell here, we're just highlighting the row. So as you can see, you can do the same thing for column. Works the same way. And if we wanted to change these colors, let's say I wanted a red highlighting, I can change this to 255 red and then 0 for the rest. Go back into here and it updates. So easy enough to do. And like I said, a fairly simple VBA code that you can easily apply just to make your spreadsheets potentially you're more user-friendly by making it easier for people to see exactly where they are in the sheet. Maybe red's a bit of a dark color, but you can always fine-tune this by searching up those different RGB values. And as you can see, not terribly difficult to set up. The main thing is you want to make sure you've got access to Visual Basic, so you can try Alt F11 or set up the developer tabs so you can see it on here and just click into here and see it. So by default, put me into sheet 1. And then the key thing is, how you want it to run. Do you want to run it before you delete something, before you double click, before you right click, when there's a calculation, when there's a table update, when there's a change in selection, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can deploy this. And in this case, we did it when there's a change in the selection, clears out everything, and then changes the color. If I want to add back what I commented out, just erase that apostrophe, and now it's gone. So now I'll have this entire row in red and the column in yellow. So now if I click away, you can see my macro is back to working how it was. So you can see the yellow overtakes the red, and that's just because that yellow highlighting happened after. So first it highlights red, then it highlights yellow. So that's why the yellow is the more predominant one in that case. But you can play around with this and change the colors as they suit you. But this is one way that you could potentially make your spreadsheet a bit easier to use, whether you want to highlight rows, columns, or potentially both, just to make it a bit easier for your users to navigate around your spreadsheet. So that covers this video on how to highlight rows and columns using VBA. Hope you found this video useful, and if you did, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.